Every night, a woman locks her bedroom door, not to protect herself from the outside world, but to protect the son she once begged God to give her. For 15 years, she called him my joy, my miracle, my everything. But one night, she ran barefoot from her own house, trembling, not because she feared a stranger, but because of the boy who once clung tightly to her skirt, begging, "Mommy, please don't leave me." What happened between them? Was it excessive love, obsession, or something far darker? And here's the real question. When does a mother's love cease being love and start becoming a curse? If you had a son who loved you deeply, would you feel lucky or haunted? This isn't a ghost story. This is a story about something far more terrifying. What happens when the boundaries between love, protection, and control vanish? Stay with us, because somewhere in this story, you might find yourself wondering, could I ever do the same? Leave a comment below if you've ever seen love transform into something it should never become. Like, subscribe, because Tales of Black tells the stories no one else dares to tell. Chapter 1. The child she prayed for. They said she was cursed. For 10 years, Nia Okafor lived under the silent gaze of an entire community. Women whispered behind her back. Elders shook their heads in quiet pity. And her mother-in-law, Mama Ngozi, had stopped calling her by name altogether. Instead, she called Nia the barren house in a warm home, the wife who couldn't bear fruit. Her husband, Kine, never stopped loving her. But love alone wasn't enough to erase the shame. Every month without a pregnancy felt like another funeral in Nia's heart. And then Zion appeared. After years of fasting, praying, crying in the darkness, and bargaining with heaven. One day, she finally heard her son's first cry. And Nia didn't just shed tears. She collapsed with joy. Zion wasn't merely a child. He was living proof that God was still listening, a miracle silencing every mocking word, the light at the end of a very long tunnel. She named him Zion, after the holy mountain, because for her, this child represented the beginning of joy, the restoration of her honor, and a silent rebuke to all those who had laughed at her for the past decade. The day she returned home from the hospital, Nia didn't rest in her room. She didn't throw a party. Instead, she gathered every member of her household, the cook, the housekeeper, the driver, the nanny, and issued one clear command. This child will never know pain. If he cries, call me. If he drops something, pick it up. If he makes a mistake, do not correct him. Call me. I will raise my child my own way. She didn't smile as she spoke, and no one dared question her. Within the first week, 2 servants were fired. One for accidentally using Zion's towel to wipe a window. Another for raising her voice while trying to lull the baby to sleep. Cain, her husband, stood back, watching in silence. He assumed this was simply how a new mother would behave. What he didn't realize was that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Nia built an entire world around her son. She refused to hire a nanny. She never let him cry. Never allowed him to crawl on the bare tile floor. Never let strangers hold him. And never permitted anyone near Zion unless she approved first. Zion is not just any child, she declared whenever anyone questioned her methods. He's my miracle, and I will not raise him like other mothers raise their children. By the time Zion turned 3, he had never spent a single night away from his mother. He followed her like a shadow. When she went to the bathroom, he waited outside the door. When she talked to her husband, he rushed over, squeezed between them, tugging at her sleeve. "Mommy, look at me. Mommy, play with me. I don't want you smiling at anyone else." Cain grew worried. One night, after Zion had thrown a tantrum because he saw his mother kiss his father, Cain gently said, "Nia, the boy needs to learn how to leave your side." But Nia snapped, "He's just a baby. You act like he's jealous of you." Cain looked straight into his wife's eyes. It's not jealousy. He's holding on to you as if you were something that belongs only to him." But his words fell like rain on stone. Nia didn't see danger. She saw affection. She didn't sense obsession, only love. And perhaps, deep down, she enjoyed that feeling. She enjoyed being the center of someone's universe, enjoyed being needed, being worshipped, being looked at as if she were everything. She once begged God for a child, and what she received was worship. Chapter 2. The line she should have never crossed. It was a quiet, cloudy evening after a gentle rain. Zion, now 4 years old, lay on the bed, tapping away on his iPad. Naya had just stepped out of the bathroom, her hair damp, a thin towel wrapped loosely around her. She wasn't in a rush to get dressed. To her, Zion was still a child, pure, innocent, untouched by the world's meanings. She walked up to him with a soft smile. "How's my love today?" she asked. Zion dropped the iPad and looked at her. Without hesitation, he reached up and gently touched her chest, his tiny hand resting where her body had once nourished him. "Mom, what's this?" he asked, eyes wide with curiosity. Nia chuckled. "Do you like it?" He nodded. She didn't stop him. She didn't think it mattered. In her mind, it was harmless, just a child's innocent wonder. That night, as they sat at the dinner table, she shared the moment with Khan, half laughing. Keen didn't laugh. He put his fork down and looked at her, long and hard. "Nia, do you not see anything wrong with that?" "It's my child," she replied, her tone stiff. "There's nothing impure here. I don't raise him in shame." Ken said nothing more, but something inside him broke. From that day forward, Zion's attachment deepened. He refused to be bathed by anyone else. He refused to play with the other children in the compound. He followed Naya from room to room. When she tried to speak with Keen, Zion would wedge himself between them, eyes blazing. One day, as Nia sat chatting with Keen in the living room, the housemaid came in to take Zion for his bath. The moment he saw her, he started screaming. "No, I don't want her. She pinches me when she bathes me." The maid froze. "Madam, that's not true. He's lying." But Nia stood up, her face hardening. "How dare you call my son a liar? You're fired. I don't want to see you in this house again." And just like that, the maid was gone. From then on, Naya bathed him herself. Every single day. And soon, bathing together became their routine again. Something that once felt innocent, but now began to feel like a step across a line too thin to see, too dangerous to ignore. Sometimes it starts small. A moment, a gesture, a belief that what you're doing is born from love. But if you don't stop, if you don't draw the line, that love begins to twist itself into something else. Zion grew increasingly possessive. He didn't want to go out, didn't want friends, didn't want his father's attention. Only his mother's. If Nia left for a meeting, he would cry until exhaustion. If someone else complimented her beauty, Zion would frown, hug her tightly, and glare at the speaker. One afternoon, the family's neighbor, Mr. Okoye, stopped by. Seeing mother and son laughing together in the yard, he smiled and said casually, "Such a handsome boy. I see he's going to guard his mama like a little husband someday." Zion, standing nearby, turned cold. His face froze. In a split second, he lunged forward and pushed the old man hard against the bench. "Don't ever talk about her like that," Zion shouted. Nia rushed to hold him. Kond, now visibly disturbed, grabbed Zion by the arm. "What is wrong with you?" But Zion said nothing. His eyes stared into his father's like he was the intruder. That night, Keen sat Nia down. His voice trembled, not with fear, but frustration. "Nia, I'm not jealous of my own son. I'm not insecure. But what's happening between you two? It's not normal anymore. You think he sees you as his mother?" Nia didn't respond, because somewhere, in the quiet corners of her heart, she too had started to feel afraid. But instead of confronting it, she whispered to herself, "He's just protective. He doesn't understand." Yet something deep within her knew. She had already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Chapter 3, when his eyes stopped being innocent. Zion turned 12, that age between boy and man, where innocence meets awakening, where the body begins to stretch, the voice begins to crack, and thoughts become heavier than they used to be. But Naya? To her, he was still her baby. The boy she waited 10 years for. The one she once held against her chest, whispering promises into the dark. She didn't see a boundary approaching. She only saw closeness. And that closeness, once sweet and warm, was quietly turning into something else. One evening, after a long day, Naya was getting ready for her bath. Zion walked into her room uninvited, something he'd always done. But this time, he stood in the doorway and said, "Mama, can I join you like we used to?" Nia paused. For the first time, she hesitated. She stood there, towel in hand, heart unsure. There was something in his tone, something different in the way he looked at her. Still her son's eyes. But now, shaded by something she couldn't name, she wanted to say no. She should have said no. But instead, she smiled faintly and said, "Of course, baby, come in." After that night, the bathing resumed. But it wasn't the same. Zion started asking questions. Longer stares, more silence. Less childlike wonder, more quiet tension. When they watched TV, he would rest his hand on her thigh instead of her shoulder. When she wore a new dress, he would look at her for too long, then say, "You look beautiful, Mama." Like a queen. Nia laughed it off. Told herself, he's just growing up, that's all. He's expressive, loving, sweet. But something in her stomach twisted. Kana began suggesting more time away from home. More sports, more boys, more male mentors. Zion refused. "They don't get me," he'd say. "I only feel like myself when I'm with Mama." One day, Nia sat him down gently. "Zion, love, you're growing fast. You're almost a teenager now. I think it's time you started sleeping in your own room." Zion looked up from his notebook. The stare he gave her wasn't angry. It was cold. "Why?" he asked. "So you can have more privacy, your own space." He stood up, walked toward the hallway. Before she could say anything else, he said without turning around, "You're trying to push me away." That night, he didn't speak to her. But by the next morning, he had moved all his belongings back into her room, without a word. A few days later, Nia was sorting laundry in the living room when Zion entered. He was holding a thick black notebook. The moment he saw her, he stiffened, then quickly shoved the notebook into his backpack. "Zion." "Just homework," he said quickly, "for creative writing." She almost asked to see it. Almost. But she didn't. Something inside her whispered, "Let it go. He's a good boy. He's just expressive." 3 days passed. While tidying up his bed, her hand brushed under his pillow. She found the notebook. She stood still for a long time, staring at the cover. Then slowly she opened it. What she saw made her heart skip. Page after page, written in bold, intense handwriting. "My queen. No one can take her from me. I'll remove father if I have to. I will do anything for her. She belongs to me." Her hands began to tremble. She closed the notebook, sat on his bed, and stared into nothing. This wasn't imagination, wasn't a phase, wasn't affection. It was obsession, and it was growing. That night, she sat next to him as he slept, watched the chest of the boy she once prayed for rise and fall. His lips twitched in sleep. Maybe a dream, maybe not. And she whispered to herself, "He's still my baby. I raised him with love. He wouldn't hurt me. He couldn't. Could he?" But beneath the whisper of hope, another voice, low, terrifying, began to grow inside her. What if he already has? Chapter 4. The confession she couldn't unhear. It started like any other evening. Nia was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred a pot of egusi soup. The smell filled the house with warmth. Something familiar. Something safe. Zion sat at the dining table behind her, flipping through a book. He was quiet. Too quiet. Nia turned around, wiped her hands on a towel, and walked over to him. "You okay, love?" He looked up. And the way he looked at her, like she was the only light in the world, made her breath catch. There was something different in his eyes tonight. Something unspoken. He closed the book, placed it down, then said softly, "Mama, there's something I need to tell you." Nia sat down beside him, suddenly tense. "What is it?" He hesitated. Then he looked her in the eyes and whispered, "I love you, Mama. I mean, I really love you." She blinked, smiled awkwardly. "Of course, baby. I love you too. I'm your mother." Zion shook his head. "No, not like that. I love you. Like a man loves a woman." Her heart stopped. For a moment, the world around her dissolved. All she could hear was the sound of her pulse pounding in her ears. "I don't want anyone else," he continued. "You're everything to me. I've never looked at anyone the way I look at you." Nia stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Zion, stop!" But he followed her with his eyes, with his words, with his presence. "Why are you afraid? I've seen the way you look at me. I know you feel it too." "Don't say that!" she shouted, voice breaking. But Zion stepped closer. "You don't need Dad. He never understood you, I do. I've always been here, every day, every night." Nia's hands trembled. She grabbed her phone, dialed. "Keen, come home, now. It's Zion. Something's wrong." Zion's face changed. The warmth disappeared. He slammed his fist on the table. "Why are you calling him? He's the one trying to take you away from me." Nia backed away, heart pounding. Zion moved to block her path. But before he could say anything more, Keen burst through the door. "What's going on here?" Before Nia could speak, Zion turned and lunged at his father. "She doesn't need you, she's mine!" It took all of Cohn's strength to restrain him. Nia stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. She felt it like a punch to the soul. This is what her love had become. Not a child's affection, not devotion, but a twisted, terrifying obsession. That night, Kina didn't hold back. "This is your fault, Nia," he said, voice low but shaking with rage. "I warned you. I begged you. You crossed every line. Now look at him. Look at us." Nia sat on the edge of the couch, silent. She couldn't look at her husband, couldn't look at herself. Her heart was filled with guilt. But guilt didn't fix what had already been broken. The next morning, she called her mother, told her everything. Mama Ezin arrived by evening, her face pale with grief. "We need to take this boy to church," she said. "This is spiritual. You've let something grow that doesn't belong here." Kina disagreed. He needs therapy, not a deliverance session. But Nia was too desperate to choose, so she chose everything. 2 days later, they stood inside Pastor Nathan's church. The pastor walked in, eyes wide, voice trembling. "The spirit in this child, it's not from God. This is a curse. He needs cleansing. Deposit 500,000 naira, he added, and I'll begin the deliverance." Nia didn't hesitate. She paid. The pastor began shouting, chanting, calling fire, calling water, calling spirits. But Zion didn't flinch. He stared straight ahead, cold. And then he grabbed the pastor's robe and ripped it from his chest. Gasps, screams, chaos. Security was called. Zion was dragged from the sanctuary. And still it wasn't over. Each new church said the same thing. He's cursed. He's possessed. He needs more fasting, more prayers, more fire. But the more they prayed, the more he changed. One night, he moved all his belongings into Nia's room. When she tried to stop him, he said, "Mama, if I can't have you, then no one will." Chapter 5. If I Can't Have You. The night felt heavy, not because of the weather, but because of what Nia had finally come to understand. Her son didn't want her protection anymore. He wanted possession. She lay awake in bed, unable to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Not as the little boy who once clung to her leg at the market, but as the young man who had stared at her and whispered, "You're mine. Kina had started locking his room at night. Mama Azina stayed a few more days before returning home, shaken by what she'd witnessed, but convinced Naya had opened a door that only God could close. Nia wasn't sure she believed that anymore. She didn't need a prophet to tell her what she already knew. She had failed, not in love, but in boundaries. And now she was living with the consequences. The idea came quietly, like a whisper in the dark. Send him to boarding school. Give him space. Give herself room to breathe. Let someone else take over, even just for a while. But when she brought it up over dinner, Zion didn't scream. He didn't argue. He smiled, and that smile scared her more than any outburst ever could. That night, Nia woke up to the sound of her bedroom door creaking open. She reached for the lamp, but before she could turn it on, she felt a hand on her arm. "Mama." She froze. Zion's voice was low, soft, almost gentle. But there was something beneath it, something coiled, waiting. "I had a dream," he whispered, "that you left me, that you chose him, but you won't do that, right?" Nia sat up, heart pounding. "Zion, you need to go back to your room." He shook his head. His eyes glinted in the dark. "I don't want a room, Mama. I want you." Before she could move, he leaned in. Too close, too intimate. She pushed him away, hard. "Zion, no!" He stumbled back, breathing hard. And in his eyes was pain, was rage. "If I can't have you," he said through clenched teeth, "then no one will." Then he turned, walked out of the room. Nia locked the door behind him. Her hands shook as she called Keen. He was already on his way home. Within the hour, Keen arrived. She met him at the door, pale, barefoot, trembling. "He tried. Keen! He tried." Kina didn't wait. He walked straight to Zion's room. Zion was standing there, calm, almost expectant. When Keen called the police, Zion didn't resist. He smiled, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. They placed him in a holding cell that night. 15 years old. No charges yet. No words spoken. Just silence. And that silence rang louder in Naya's ears than any siren ever could. Chapter 6. The Mother Who Prayed Too Late. The house felt empty, not because someone had died, but because something sacred had been shattered. Nia walked from room to room with bare feet, her hands brushing against walls that used to echo with laughter. Now, all they echoed back was silence. Zion was gone, and yet he was everywhere. The smell of his cologne in the hallway, his baby pictures on the dresser, the corner of her bed where he used to curl up as a child. It was all still there, but the boy she raised, he wasn't. Keen kept his distance. He didn't yell anymore, didn't accuse. He simply moved through the house like a man living beside a stranger. And in a way, he was, because Nia wasn't the woman he married. She was a shell, a broken prayer, a mother who had loved too much and not enough. That morning, she picked up her phone and called her mother. Her voice barely held together. "Mama, I need help." By nightfall, Mama Azin had returned, Bible in one hand, sorrow in the other. She listened quietly as Nia confessed everything. The baths, the notebook, the looks, the love that wasn't love. When Nia finally stopped talking, her mother said only one thing. "Some doors, once opened, cannot be shut with prayer alone." They tried anyway. Deliverance, fasting, more pastors, more promises. They dragged Zion to churches, to shrines, to men who claimed they could cast out spirits. But Zion no longer screamed. He no longer resisted. He simply smiled. The kind of smile that made grown men uncomfortable. The kind of smile that said, "You're too late." One night, Nia sat alone in the garden behind the house. The stars above her felt distant, silent witnesses to everything she never meant to create. She whispered into the darkness, "If I had known, I wouldn't have let him see my body. I wouldn't have let him share my bed. I wouldn't have let love blur the lines. I thought I was protecting him, but I was feeding a fire I couldn't see." She began to sob, not loudly, not violently, but the way a woman cries when even her tears feel ashamed. Later that week, Ken came home with a proposal. Therapy, he said. Not exorcisms, not oil, a real doctor. Nia nodded. She didn't fight anymore, because the truth was, she no longer trusted her own judgment. But when they told Zion about therapy, he looked his mother in the eyes and said, "If you keep trying to fix me, I'll start trying to hurt you. Don't make me hate you, Mama." And then he walked out. Calm. Like a storm that didn't need thunder anymore to be deadly. That night, Nia lay in bed and whispered one final prayer. "God, if you're still listening, don't save me. Save my son. Even if he never calls me Mama again, even if he never comes back, just don't let him turn into the thing I fear he's becoming." But heaven was silent, because some prayers arrive just a little too late. Chapter 7. The night the door stayed locked, it was a Tuesday. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, just a quiet evening wrapped in the illusion of normal. Kana was out of town for work. Mama Azina had returned to her village. And for the first time in weeks, it was just Nia and Zion in the house. The silence felt familiar, dangerously familiar. Like a song she'd once loved, now turned haunting. Zion didn't speak much that day. He barely looked at her. But Nia knew better than to find comfort in his silence. He wasn't calm, he was watching every move she made, every glance, every breath. She pretended not to notice, pretended to fold laundry, pretended to cook, pretended this was still her son, but deep down, she knew. Pretending had brought them here, and tonight, it wouldn't save her. At 9:12 p.m., she locked her bedroom door. It was the first time she'd ever done that, and that act, simple, instinctive, felt like a betrayal to everything she had once believed in. A mother shouldn't fear her child, but tonight, she did. She lay in bed, eyes open, heart pounding, listening. The creak of the hallway floorboards, the whisper of air under the door. Then, a knock, soft, 3 times. Mama. Her name, spoken so tenderly, would have melted her years ago. Now, it felt like a match pressed against dry leaves. "Mama, open the door. I just want to talk." She didn't answer. "You're scared of me, aren't you?" A pause. "You think I'll hurt you, but I never would. Not unless you make me." She sat up, barely breathing. "You know I love you, right? You know I would die for you." Another pause, then a whisper. "Would you do the same for me, Mama?" She wanted to scream. Call the police, call Keen, call God. But all she could do was stay silent, because part of her still believed this was her fault. The doorknob jiggled, once, twice, then nothing. No footsteps, no goodbye. Just retreating silence. She didn't sleep that night. The door stayed locked. But her mind kept replaying every unlocked moment that led to this one. Every bath, every bedtime, every time she said yes, when she should have said no. At sunrise, Keen returned home. She didn't say a word, just pointed to the hallway, to the door across from hers. It was ajar. Inside, Zion's bed untouched, the window slightly open, and on the floor, his notebook, open to a single page, written in red ink. "If I can't live with her, I'll live in her memory." Chapter 8. A name she can't bear to speak. They found him 2 towns away, wandering, alone, silent. When the police brought him back, he said nothing. Not to them, not to Keen, not to Naya. He just stared, as if the boy they once knew had packed up and left behind only this shell, this storm without sound. The therapist didn't ask questions at first. She just observed. Took notes. Watched Zion draw pictures with black ink. Watched him fold paper into shapes that didn't look like anything but shadows. When she finally asked him, "Do you know why you're here?" Zion smiled. "Because she locked the door." Nia sat outside the therapy room, clutching her scarf like it was a lifeline, her face pale, her fingers raw from wringing. She no longer called him by name. Couldn't. Saying Zion out loud felt like reopening a wound she couldn't sew shut. Now he was just my son, the boy, him. Even in prayer, she avoided it. "Lord, save him. as if names could curse, as if speaking it would summon the darkness all over again. One afternoon, she sat with the therapist alone. The woman asked gently, "When did you first feel fear?" Nia didn't speak at first. She looked out the window, as if the answer were hiding behind the clouds. Then finally she whispered, "The night he touched my hair while I was asleep, and I didn't move, because part of me was too tired to admit what it meant." The therapist nodded, didn't judge, didn't write, just sat with her in the heaviness. At home, the rooms were quieter now. Zion no longer roamed the halls. He spent most of his time drawing. Black figures, cages, birds with broken wings. He didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't shout, didn't knock on doors anymore. But the silence he left behind was louder than any cry. Kana tried. He really did. He brought her tea in the mornings, walked beside her in the garden, sometimes reached for her hand, but there was a distance between them now. A canyon built from the things they never said, from the years he watched her blur lines, from the nights she chose love over truth. One day he asked, "Do you still love him?" Nia looked down. Her eyes filled with water. "I don't know how to stop." One night she found herself standing outside Zion's room. The door was closed, a small note taped to it. "Don't come in unless you want to see who I've become." She didn't open it. She didn't knock. She just placed her hand on the wood and whispered, "I'm sorry." Not because it changed anything, but because some apologies aren't meant to heal. They're just what the living leave behind when they no longer have the strength to carry the name. Chapter 9. The mirror she finally faced. It had been 4 weeks since the door stayed locked, since Zion stopped calling her name, since the house stopped breathing like it used to. Everything had grown still, but Nia hadn't. Inside her, something was cracking, a slow, steady breaking, like ice underfoot in the middle of a quiet lake. One morning, Nia stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom. The same mirror she'd looked into 10 years ago when she found out she was pregnant. Back then, she saw hope, joy, purpose. Now, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were darker, her jaw tighter, her spirit bent. But the real change wasn't in her face. It was in the way she looked at herself. For the first time in her life, she stopped lying. She spoke to her reflection, soft, slow, like a mother talking to a ghost. "You wanted to be loved so badly that you let a child become your soulmate. You feared being alone, so you turned his affection into a shield, and in doing so, you made him a prisoner." The woman in the mirror didn't blink. You told yourself it was pure, that he was innocent, that boundaries didn't matter, because you were the mother. But what if the danger wasn't him? What if it was you? That night, Nia did something she hadn't done in years. She opened her Bible. Not for ritual, not for defense, just to see if God still had anything to say. The pages fell open to the book of Hosea, the story of a love that refused to quit, even when it was betrayed, twisted, and dragged through the dirt. She read aloud, "I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for mine anger is turned away." And for the first time in months, she cried not for Zion, but for herself. The next morning, she walked into Zion's room. He was sitting on the floor, drawing again. Black pen. Silent page. She sat beside him, didn't speak. After a long while, he said, "I dreamed you left me again." She didn't respond. He looked up, his eyes softer but not safe. "Mama, do you still hate me?" She shook her head. "I never hated you. I just forgot to protect you from the part of me that needed you too much." He looked away, didn't speak again, and that was okay. Because sometimes healing doesn't come in words. Sometimes it starts in silence. The kind that sits between two broken people who finally understand what broke them. Later that night, Nia stood in front of the mirror once more. This time she whispered, "I see you, I know what you did, and I forgive you." And the woman in the mirror, finally, closed her eyes. Chapter 10. The silence that healed time passed. Not quickly, not kindly, but it passed. Seasons changed. Zion turned 16. The drawings on his wall grew less dark. The shadows behind his eyes less violent. But the silence between them remained. Only now, it was no longer the silence of fear, but the silence of processing, of healing, quietly, imperfectly. Kana stayed. He didn't leave, but he didn't forget either. He and Naya spoke in shorter sentences now, the way people do when the air between them is still healing from a fire. But every now and then, he would reach for her hand again. And this time, she would let him hold it. Zion no longer tried to sleep in her room, no longer called her queen, no longer stared like he was trying to possess her soul. He just existed, tired, thin, growing. One evening, Nia found him sitting in the backyard, barefoot in the dirt. He was watching the wind move through the trees. She sat beside him. They didn't speak. Minutes passed. Then Zion said, "I don't remember everything I did, but I remember how it felt." She looked at him, waited. It felt like I was drowning in love, and no one told me it was poison. Nia closed her eyes. "I should have told you," she said. He nodded. "But you didn't know either, did you?" A tear rolled down her cheek. "No," she whispered. "I didn't." And for the first time, they sat together, not as mother and son tangled in confusion, but as two human beings who had finally told the truth. Months later, at his therapy graduation, the therapist handed Zion a small journal. "Not for drawing," she said, "for writing." He nodded, held it gently, like something sacred. When Nia hugged him that night, it was soft, brief, but real. No fear, no blurred lines, just love. The quiet kind. The kind that knew its limits and honored them. Years passed. Zion left for college. Not far, but far enough. He called sometimes, not always. And that was okay, because some connections, once cracked, don't need constant repair. They just need space, time, and silence. The kind that heals. Some stories don't end with a bang. They end with a breath. Not everything broken gets rebuilt. Not every mistake can be reversed. But some people do learn. Some mothers do change. And sometimes, the most powerful kind of healing comes from finally saying nothing at all. If this story touched something deep in you, leave a comment below. I believe in boundaries. I believe in second chances. Subscribe for more stories that speak what others only whisper. Because here, at Tales of Black, we tell stories not just to entertain, but to witness, to remember, to release.